Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, we get to talk about a lot of people that are going to make the audience mad. So, this will probably be either our most or least popular show, depending on whether people like being angry online. I don't know. What are you expecting?
Oh, do people like being angry online? I don't know. Does Kool-Aid love water? Yes, Kool-Aid loves water.
Let me answer that question with just two words. Oh, yeah.
Do it in Australian.
Sorry, I need to burst through a wall. And I believe that one's load bearing, so I don't think I can do that. So, sorry.
So we are talking today about Ohio State villains, not necessarily former Buckeyes or former Ohio State coaches that are villains via Ohio State fans or that Ohio State fans view them as villains, although there are a couple. I'm just interested to know who Ohio State fans consider the biggest villains of the last century. And one of the reasons I said this century, particular century, is because, yeah, I know Desmond Howard, Charles Woodson. Yes, we get that. I was, I guess, a little surprised than I shouldn't have been to see that some people were also saying Desmond Howard. And I'm like, but he hasn't played in forever. But also, yeah, I mean, that one makes some sense. I don't have him. Let me see. Do I have him in the top five here? I do not. I've got him at six. I've got a list of five, but that one, I understand. Shoot, you could just have him on here for the CJ Stroud Heisman stuff.
Yeah, I get it. I think for the on-field stuff, if you're old enough to remember the on-field stuff, yeah, that would definitely be someone who would make probably a lot of people's list. Same for Charles Woodson,
Mhm.
but in both cases, yeah, they've done some stuff on TV. Desmond Howard is a little less artful in how he does it, a little more obvious in the trolling that he does, singing the victors at the top
Mhm.
of Ohio Stadium on game day. Was that the Texas game in 2005? I think that was a long time ago. But yeah, the CJ Stroud Heisman stuff, all that. Yeah, it's I get it, but yeah, I would certainly not have him in a top five for this kind of list. No.
You just reminded me of somebody who should also be mentioned, Nick Lachey, who sang that song with Desmond Howard. Another also earning votes, Juice Williams, former Illinois quarterback, who a villain in the fact that Ohio State could do nothing to stop him. And
Hmm.
it's not that he's a bad guy. It's just that 2007 Illinois game, and eventually it didn't mean anything. But at the time, it sure felt like it did.
Hmm. Yeah, that was one in the moment that felt like an absolute dagger through the heart of Ohio State's season, and then it turned out, nope, there. Don't worry, 10 things crazier than this are going to happen in the next 3 weeks, and Ohio State's going to be comfortably in as the number one team at just weeks after they looked like they were going to be completely out of the field. So yeah, I think that one's where that's another one where I feel like you probably are going to, that could have been, but I don't. I would leave that off my list. I have well, I don't know. Well, you go ahead and you have your top five. I
Okay.
have several names that you mentioned that one, and I had an oh man, I bet he has forgotten this person. So we'll see if you have forgotten this person. Tony, do you have any special teamers on your list?
There are none. So go ahead and go ahead. I left all of the Ohio State kickers off that Ohio State fans
No,
are
no,
telling
no,
me.
no, no, no. Now I have to remember the name of Michigan State's kicker in
Oh,
2015, Michael Geiger,
wow.
who kicked the field goal to seal the win over Ohio State in 2015, and then ran down the field doing the windmill thing. That was one where, much like the Juice Williams thing, it felt like, oh, this is the dagger through the heart of the season. But in that case, it actually was, and that was a team that probably could have and maybe should have won the national championship, and instead that kick killed that season.
But it does lead me to directly to the number five person on this list, 2015 offensive coordinator Ed Warner, who was gifted a talented team. Now, I will also say a team that I've said 1,000 times was looking ahead to the NFL, a team that had a two quarterback system that wasn't really a system. It was whatever the opposite of a system is, a theory. I don't know. But you had Cardale Jones trying to be JT Barrett trying to be Cardale Jones, and neither accomplishing what they needed to accomplish. And so a first time sort of offensive coordinator, play caller, certainly at Ohio State with Ed Warner. It just did not go well. The Every game was a struggle, and that's even with Ezekiel Elliott rushing for another 15, 1,800 yards or whatever. It's just it was bad all around, and I understand why Urban Meyer did it because Ed Warner was next in line, and and so there's that aspect of it. I would also put him on the list. Maybe he should be higher because he's also, I think, responsible for Tim Beck then coming in as well. So for all of the good Ed Warner did from 2012 to 2014, that was all undone by 2015 alone.
Yeah, that's a good one. And but you mentioned his name, and I kind of went, ooh, boy, you could probably make a pretty compelling list of five former Ohio State players or coaches who are the biggest villains of Ohio State football of this century. Because you can think of a few. And Warner, yeah, he was kind of the next man up, but it was he was the co-OC under Tom Herman when Tom Herman was the OC, and then Tom Herman leaves to take the head coaching job at Houston. So it was kind of all right, everyone take one step to the right. And then he was the OC in 2015, the OC again in 2016, another year that did not end particularly well for Ohio State football on the offensive side of the ball. And then I'm just going to read you the rest of his career.
Mm-hmm.
He voluntarily left, and even the people listening on podcasts and not watching on YouTube can see the air quotes with he voluntarily left to take a lateral move to be the offensive line coach at Minnesota, which famously position coach at Minnesota, the exact same as an offensive coordinator at Ohio State. Spent a few years as Michigan's offensive line coach, then was the assistant head coach and run game coordinator and offensive line coach at Florida Atlantic, then went to St. Thomas University, which is in Miami Gardens, Florida. He was the tight ends coach there for 2024 to 2025. Tony, I will give you $1 million if you can tell me where Ed Warner is now, what his position is, without cheating.
I will say he is the quarterback's coach of Pensacola High School.
You're not wrong, but you're also not right. He is the head coach of Avila University, which is, according to Wikipedia, a private Catholic university in Kansas City, Missouri, sponsored by the Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet, and offers bachelor degrees and master's degrees. So there you go, the head coach of Avila University. So, this is one where kind of peaked in this is like the peaked in high school kind of people where it's like, oh man, it's you were you were the offensive coordinator of Ohio State. Wow, what are you doing now? Like, well, things have happened, and it's so yeah. He was definitely a big part of the why behind the 2015 struggles, the 2016 struggles at the end of the season. But yeah, I think that's a good one, and I don't think any Ohio State fan who remembers the mid 2010s is going to disagree with that choice.
The next one, number 4 on this list, maybe a little bit out of the blue, Georgia defensive back Javon Bullard, who, Tom, you have a personal relationship with, but he is the guy that knocked Marvin Harrison out of the game in 2022. Initially called a targeting, was overturned, and Ohio State was the team that actually got the player ejected as Marvin Harrison was knocked out of the game. Turned the game around and just changed Ohio State's fortunes in that. And then Bullard went and tried to profit off of the hit, which I think that's what firmly lands him inside this top 5. Is, and Tom, you can go ahead and discuss this further since you were directly involved in this.
Yes, this was one of my. I remember photographers talking about looking at pictures and going, "I took that picture," and I was like, "How could you possibly remember that?" And there was a night, I don't know, several months after that game where there was a big scandal on Twitter that Javon Bullard had autographed photos of the hit with his name and the phrase "night night," which was probably not in great taste. And I remember looking at the photo and going, "Huh, it looks a lot like a picture I took," and going back and going, that is a picture I took, and going, I don't remember talking to a memorabilia dealer in the state of Georgia about licensing that photo, and certainly not for this particular use. So, yes, that was had to pursue some legal remedies to get that pulled off the market. That was a real fun story. You may remember that from the spring of 2023. But yeah, that's one. I was going to put Stetson Bennett on this list because
Mm.
he's kind of got some like Eddie Haskell energy maybe, but also had a big role in leading Georgia to that win. But yeah, I think Javon Bullard is probably really sort of the proximate cause of that loss more than Stetson Bennett, because if that either he doesn't make that hit, that's a touchdown, and Ohio State has a commanding lead, or it gets called a targeting, then Ohio State picks up a first down and probably punches it in, and then that probably seals the game. And instead got away with it, which if you go back and look for that photo, that's what launching looks like, and it was not called targeting. And so yeah, that's a really good. That's a name that people won't necessarily remember, but then as soon as you explain
Mm.
it and it takes them back to that moment, yeah, I think that's going to be someone that Ohio State fans would definitely have on this list.
I left that game with such respect for Stetson Bennett and his
Mhm.
game and his ability to just never give up and make something happen. And so it's like, I don't, it's one of those things where do Ohio State fans leave that game saying, that guy is just really good? Or is it one of those things where it's just like, I hate that guy. I hate that guy. But there's somebody that I don't want to say that you could hate justifiably, but there's somebody there that you can have some ire towards, and he is number 4 on the list. Number 3, Tom, Kevin Warren, the former Big Ten commissioner who canceled the 2020 football season, and then Ohio State fought to get the 2020 football season brought back. And it's not just because of that. There was, we were, people were talking poorly about him pretty early on, and we all remember the press conferences he did from his house, or the availabilities he did from his house with all of his certificates and all of that, so everybody could see it. And then shutting down football and leaving Tony Petitti with like unsigned television deals. Um, this is more, maybe this is more of a Big Ten villain, but I know we did a lot of shows about Kevin Warren, and we I was in Chicago when the Ohio State parents were there to protest the Big Ten and his decision making, and so I only put him number 3 on this list because if I didn't have him on this list, there'd be people would be protesting me, and I don't need that. So Kevin Warren, number 3 on this list.
And he very easily could have been number one on this list if they had canceled that season and then the SEC played and the ACC played. I mean, that would have been a real. I mean, the idea of Ohio State not playing Michigan in a season is just mind blowing, and that's a whole separate story. We may get to talk about a primary character in that story in just a few minutes, I'm going to guess. But the idea that Ohio State might have just not played a season of football, and you have all these players, you think about there. There has been conversations about the 2020 high school seniors who didn't get to play their senior season of baseball, or who didn't get to play their, Travion Henderson didn't get to play his senior season of football because Virginia didn't play football in the fall of 2020. I mean, there's all sorts of people who missed out on these experiences, and that was a point where you kind of were figuring out like, okay, like I went to a middle school football game with our next door neighbor was playing middle school football at that point. I went to a sixth grade football game, and the Big Ten's going, nope, it's impossible. It's like, I'm pretty sure you have more resources than the middle school football team. And Ohio State is holding in-person classes. And like, if you can do this, if you can have students living in dorms, you can have people playing football. Like you can take precautions, you can do testing, all that kind of stuff. And it was that initial announcement was not just the season was canceled. It was the season was canceled. This decision will not be revisited. And it was like, things are changing so quickly here. Like there was not a clear yes or no right answer to a lot of stuff at that point. I think people are looking back at stuff now and going, well, all they had to do was this. It's like, well, you have more information than they had back then. But with the
Mhm.
rate things were changing back then, it was like you should not be putting down firm and final markers like this is not going to happen, no chance, never, ever, ever. Like you have to sort of let stuff play out a little bit. And as it turned out, yes, you could in fact play a football season that year. Football players were, generally in pretty good shape coming out of that year. It was not, this is not something that killed a bunch of college students. It was like it ended up being fine. But yeah, he was someone who at that point it was like, why, who is this guy and why is he doing this to all those people? And this was an example where Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, those guys really really came out and led the fight to get them on the field, and it ended up working out.
Yeah, I remember going to that parents' protest in Chicago, and then on the way home watching Caden Curry play a high school football game. It was possible.
Yep.
So that's number 3. Number 2 on this list, Tom, and I don't have the name of the person. Maybe I could go get it, but I don't want to dox them.
Like, can I guess? Is it the replay official in the Fiesta Bowl?
100% it is the replay official in the Clemson game where not only does he buzz down to overturn the fumbled touchdown return, he also buzzed down to get Sean Wade for targeting on a hit of Trevor Lawrence maybe.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so to have a replay official buzz down twice, fine, but to overturn both calls and just really put himself in there, or herself. I'm not, whoever it was, again, I'm not trying to dox anybody, but that person took away the opportunity for everyone to see Ohio State against LSU. And I think that is one of the biggest missed matches that I can remember. It would have been a dream to watch Ohio State's defense against LSU's offense. And let's not forget, Ohio State's offense was pretty darn good as well. And LSU's defense, sometimes they got into some shootouts. So I just, it's one of those things. That's one of my sports regrets, not getting to see that game, like not getting to see Ted Ginn run the 40 at the NFL Combine, those sorts of things. And boy, that guy or gal, the fact that they're only number 2 on this list gives you an idea of who number 1 is. But boy, uh, they robbed Ohio State and Ohio State fans from some serious fun.
Yeah, the Sean Wade one was like, yeah, it was that was a yes, that was probably by the technical rule was probably targeting Trevor Lawrence. If you go back and watch that replay, ducked his head right beforehand, and it was like, what do you want him to do? Like, there was nothing he could do to avoid that. He was not going to be targeting him, and then Lawrence ducked, and then all of a sudden he was. But man, that overturn on the Jordan Fuller scoop and score, that remains one of the or was it pick six? Scoop and score, right?
Yep, scoop and score.
Yes, because it was the
Yep.
whether the receiver had caught it. Yeah, that was one of the most inexplicable overturns where it was called a touchdown on the field, and everyone's watching the replay and going, "Well, that's clearly a catch." And they're like, "Well, this is clear video evidence that it wasn't a catch." It's like, "What? What are you watching? What is going on?" And yeah, that was a pretty bad replay overturn. Replay generally does a pretty good job
Mhm.
of getting it right, and I think replay has gotten a lot better over the last few years. That was one where that was a bad overturn, and in a game where Ohio State needed, Clemson needed about 10 different things to go right for them, and it was, J.K. Dobbins gets hurt,
Mhm.
and Ohio State settles for a bunch of field goals, and that one gets overturned, and Sean Wade gets kicked out, and Ryan Day decides to punt, and the punt doesn't get down inside the 5, and I mean on and on and on and on, and all those things went right for Clemson because that was a game Ohio State completely dominated the first half and probably should have been up by 3 touchdowns, and instead it was like 16-14 at halftime or something like that. And so yeah, that was one where pretty clearly I assumed this had to be on the list because that was at the time. I remember walking out of the stadium, like, talking to our buddy Matt Conley, who covered
Mhm.
Clemson, and just very sadly being like, "Well, enjoy New Orleans," and just the thought of what could have been
Yeah.
2 incredible weeks of not just Ohio State and LSU, which were I think pretty clearly the top 2 teams that year, but also Joe Burrow, Ohio State, like the stories and the content that
Mhm.
would have come out of those weeks not to mention the actual matchup. That would have been just an absolutely incredible game. And just to and then the Clemson LSU game was not really that competitive because it was just LSU played an Oklahoma team that was just was not made from the same stuff as the other three teams in the playoffs that year, and then got Clemson, which is probably also the not the second best team either.
Yeah, and we've said several times, though, any of those three teams in any given year probably going to win a national championship if they're
Mm-hmm.
not facing like the 2020 Alabama Crimson Tide or something like that. Number one on this list, Tom, and I do not have Connor Stallions on this list because I'm not going to blame the bullet for the trigger. I'm not going to blame the bullet because it's he's just he's just a tool. Um,
Say more.
but number one on this list is Jim Harbaugh, and for every reason that people have let me know, have expressed to anybody that will listen. We go back to the Big Ten media days where he said we're going to beat Ohio State or die trying, and then 3 years of NCAA violations later, it's you've got that run going, and so just for everything that happened 21, 22, 23, this is a very it's a very black mark on him because boy, he's good luck coaching. He's never going to coach in college football again. Black mark on Michigan, even though Michigan and their fans will tell you it's everybody does it. Well, I don't see the punishments being handed out the way that they were for this one. But to go above and beyond, and then to say to kind of not talk to the NCAA, wash your hands of it, and then leave. I feel like he should be getting more grief from Michigan fans, but they've got a title, so they're not going to do that. But I can tell you, Urban Meyer gave Florida 2 titles, and there were people who still don't like him today. That is a thing you can do,
Mm-hmm.
is be a little angry at what a head coach does and the way they leave your program. So that's number one. Jim Harbaugh, who we talked for years about, boy, before 2021 and the years like before that, how he just doesn't seem to be having fun. He needs to change some things up. We weren't talking about this. We weren't talking about doing something like this, but yeah, Jim Harbaugh, number one on the list.
And I think you could, if you wanted to, you could put JJ McCarthy on this list somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Because he has that like Joker origin story where he wanted to go to Ohio State and Ohio State chose Kyle McCord over him, and then he beats
Yeah.
Ohio State a couple times and comes into Ohio State and is waving at smirking and waving at fans and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, you could certainly put Connor Stallions on this list, but yeah, it all kind of goes back to Jim Harbaugh, and so Jim Harbaugh I think is the easiest number one in the history of number ones to be on this list. Where yeah, he said we're going to beat Ohio State or die trying. It was like, well, it turns out all of the above was also sort of an answer because he did beat Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
They did win the national championship, but at what cost? And the at what cost is, boy, you go through some of those coaching staffs after he said those things, and it's like multiple of your offensive coordinators have been incarcerated since that time. Your defensive coordinator got a show cause. You got a show cause. You had 3 separate years where your head coach was suspended for NCAA and or Big Ten violations. 3 separate years. That is, and I think the biggest fine in the history of the NCAA, if not very, very close, for a program that for years and years and years prided itself on we do things the right way. Now there's a lot of rationalization of all of that stuff. And oh, well, everyone does it. Well, okay, now you are now part of everyone. So now you're not special. You're no longer the prettiest girl, the special snowflake. You're just like everyone else. You can stop pretending. And also you didn't get anything out of it. Like I would go ahead and just look at a bar chart of Michigan, the last 50 years of Michigan football, see if you can pick out the 3 years where Connor Stallions was active. I bet you can because it's the 3 tallest bars on the graph. It's not a question how much of an impact that had. And this all goes back to Jim Harbaugh. And Jim Harbaugh, has always sort of maintained that he had no idea what was going on. And how could I? Yeah, everyone I'm sure kept it like I'm sure no one walked in and said, yes, this is going on. This is exactly what he's doing. It's against these bylaws. Not everyone reads bylaws, Tony. I can tell you that. But there's also sort of the Bo Schembechler mentality. Bo Schembechler, in one of his autobiographies, wrote about the fact that if you don't know what's going on in your own program, it's because you don't want to know what's going on. Like, it's your obligation to know what's going on. And Jim Harbaugh is a Bo Schembechler disciple, so you would certainly assume that he sort of knows what's going on, or if he doesn't, it's because he doesn't want to know. So yeah, I think Jim Harbaugh is an easy number one, and they got what they wanted,
Mhm.
and then what? And then what is, it's they have not maintained that level by any means. The guy after Jim Harbaugh is already gone. They have not, they've been at what, the Citrus Bowl and the Outback Bowl the last couple of years, and yes, they beat Ohio State in 2024. Yes, absolutely. That's the immediate response to everything. And these are the people who, for decades and decades, looked at schools like Ohio State or Alabama and said, "Oh, you think that winning justifies everything?" It's like, well, look, did the words coming out of your mouth right now, can you square that with the stuff that you said? No? Okay. So, yeah, Jim Harbaugh, to me, easy, easy, easy number one. I think the question is, should more than one Michigan person be on this list? And I'm sure a lot of people would say yes.
Well, and that's another show, the five Michigan, former Wolverine villains or whatever, because there's there's plenty, but of the last century, not as many as there
Mm-hmm.
were the previous 2 decades, basically. And
Mm-hmm.
you could throw Tim Biakabatuka in there. You could, there are plenty of guys. But did I miss anybody? If you're watching, go ahead and throw some of the misses in the comments. I, there's enough to go around, I would say. In a list of five, you're probably not also not going to get all of the Michigan villains that people have, but we touched on it, and like I said, some people have Connor Stalions number one. I think he wasn't a pawn in the game of life, but go put the blame with the head coach. That's what I'm doing here. And so, if you are watching, hit the thumbs up. We'd appreciate that. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell to be notified. Audio side, 5-star rating and review is always appreciated. There's this thing now, Tom, with YouTube. You can hype videos. If you're watching, you can like, I think it's on the mobile side. If you look down to where you would subscribe or whatever, where the first comment is, if you want to hype it, you can hype it. It helps us get seen by more people. I think you can do it 3 times a day, and there's hype points. You can read all about it on Google. But if you want to do that to help us out, that would be appreciated as well. That will do it from here. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you all later.